London businessman Martin Copley has set aside $750,000 to buy and develop the 75-hectare block. The bush here is about as pristine as you can get, packed with the food and shelter our native animals need to survive. But they won't stand a chance unless the two big predators are wiped out. Foxes and feral cats. A special predator-proof fence must be built along the perimeter so creatures like Misty can thrive in peace.
It's an investment, isn't it, in the future and in our children's future. I would have thought that's the best sort of investment one can make.
30 years ago, a seed was planted that has led to the formation of one of the most important and significant conservation organisations in the world. Australian Wildlife Conservancy. Australia's unique biodiversity is facing a crisis. Introduced predators like feral cats and foxes, feral herbivores, weeds, mismanaged fire and the impact of a changing climate are driving Australia's wildlife to extinction. Australia already has the worst rate of recent mammal extinctions in the world, and scientists predict more species will become extinct over the coming years unless we take urgent action.
Australia now is the guardian of a unique collection of animals, mammals, birds, insects, flowers, unlike anything else in the world. And it's all in your hands.
Australian Wildlife Conservancy takes a practical, science-based approach to conservation. It's an innovative model that involves working alone or in partnership with pastoralists, Indigenous groups, government, private landholders and universities to deliver the best possible outcomes for wildlife on a vast landscape scale.
That's why AWC is so very important. And science runs through the whole activities of AWC in a most admirable way. There are a lot of ingredients to success in conservation. Part of it, of course, is money. Part of it, of course, is having the area where you can do things. Part of it, of course, is having science behind you. And part of it, of course, is having dedicated people who give their lives to dealing with these problems.
30 years ago, Australian Wildlife Conservancy's founder Martin Copley had a vision to act upon the alarming rate of biodiversity loss in Australia. Over 3 decades, one property in the southwest of Western Australia has led to the creation of Australian Wildlife Conservancy, which now owns, works in partnership or manages 31 sanctuaries spanning more than 6.5 million hectares in some of the most iconic regions in Australia.
Effective fire management, feral predator and herbivore control, weed eradication and the rewilding of endangered species are critical tools in Australian Wildlife Conservancy's conservation toolkit. Australian Wildlife Conservancy also conducts the largest biodiversity monitoring program in Australia. It's a massive effort, but it's vitally important because it allows us to build an inventory of the species that we protect and to measure our progress on the ground. It's the only way we can be sure we're generating the best positive outcomes for wildlife.
As we look back over the last 30 years, we acknowledge our staff, our partners, our volunteers and our wonderful supporters who have helped Australian Wildlife Conservancy grow to be the largest owner and manager of private land for conservation in Australia. We're making great progress. Australian Wildlife Conservancy now protects 74% of Australian mainland mammal species, 88% of native bird species, 55% of reptile species, and 54% of amphibian species across our network of sanctuaries and partnership areas across Australia. Despite our progress, however, across the rest of the continent, Australia's extinction record continues to escalate. 34 mammal species have gone extinct since European settlement. Australia's threatened species list has increased by 36% in the last 15 years. A further 1,800 species of flora and fauna hang by a slender thread. We need to take decisive action now if we're to prevent more species being added to Australia's extinction record. Over the next 30 years, we'll be deploying more ecologists and more land managers in the field at the front line of conservation where they can make the biggest difference for Australia's wildlife. We'll collaborate with more Indigenous groups to help care for country. We'll engage with pastoralists and private landholders to expand our reach. And we'll rewild more threatened species on private and government land. In other words, we're significantly expanding our partnership model in order to achieve the best possible outcomes for our biodiversity. We're rewriting the future for biodiversity in this country. We're providing hope for Australia's threatened wildlife and their habitats, now, for the next 30 years and beyond.
I particularly wanted, ladies and gentlemen, to send my warmest congratulations and gratitude to the Australian Wildlife Conservancy team for their outstanding work over these past 30 years. Their science-based approach and innovative land management practices are making a significant impact in protecting wildlife across Australia. I have now had the great pleasure of being patron of the Australian Wildlife Conservancy for the past 8 years, and God willing, I much look forward to celebrating your wins for Australia's wildlife for many more years to come.